Hello, everyone. We have another interview from the past. This is with two artists in Chicago, William Dolan and Karen Perl. They were about to have a art show at a gallery that I was working at, the Hofheimer Gallery. So this show already happened in the past. It's was recorded in probably 2019. Both of them are from Chicago. They grew up in Chicago and they do paintings of Chicago. It is an interesting conversation, so please enjoy my conversation with Karen Pearl and William Dolan. Bill and Karen, we have a lot in common. We are all artists based in Chicago. We are involved in a show that's happening in Chicago starting May 6th in Ravenswood at the Hofheimer Gallery. You two are the artists that are showing, and I work at the gallery, so I'm kind of coordinating the thing. But the other thing that we have in common is the subject matter of our art. And at least what I've seen, it's a lot about structures and buildings, and that's one of my favorite subject matters. And it's something you guys paint. I'm not sure if it's your favorite. Let's start the conversation with that, because that's something creatively we have in common. Can you tell me about, I guess, Karen, if you want to start, can you tell me a little bit about where that came from and what that means to you and why that's your subject matter?
Well, I've always had a strong response to spaces, to where the room I'm in, the building I'm in, what it looks like from the outside, from the inside. But I didn't really start painting buildings until I think we moved it was in the 90s. We moved to France. And I had been doing just dream imagery and we were suddenly in this beautiful place with
So the dream imagery, meaning it was stuff that you had just thought up in your imagination.
Dreams and imagination. And a lot of when I studied in art school, I did a lot of figure drawing and stuff like that, very much into composition, composing a space, a drawing, or a canvas. And when we moved to France, I was suddenly surrounded by all this magnificent, beautiful architecture, and I was just awestruck. So, and the weather was nice. It was south of France, and I would just go out and paint. And I just set up my little easel. I had a little dog with me, and I would paint. And I got so involved in painting outside, and we lived there for 2 years. And when we got back from France, back to Chicago, I thought, well, what am I going to do now? Because my whole center, as far as my artwork, had been working outside.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, well, you know what? Maybe I'll just keep going. So I started doing it in Chicago, and in the winter, sometimes I would drive around in my car and paint.
When you were in France, were you painting in urban areas or were you painting in rural areas? And what I'm trying to figure out is whether you were painting both man-made structures with nature, the two combined.
The two combined, because I had a really strong response to the fact that I was in a place where there were things around me that were really, really old.
Yeah.
And there were lots of ghosts. And I've thought this before. It didn't come to me actually till later on. But, the ghosts in France didn't even seem scary anymore because they seemed really old. I mean, these structures are so old that they're not inhabiting the buildings anymore. So, and then back in Chicago, the ghosts seems that like they were still alive, so it was a little bit more eerie, and that kind of helped me make a connection.
And by ghosts, you mean you can just see some of the past? In the
Yeah, you get a sense that it's 100 years ago, it's 100, maybe 125 years ago. It's not 1,000, it's not 500 years ago.
Okay.
So,
okay, great.
So,
I have a lot of comments on that, but I'm going to hold off because Bill, I want to hear where this comes from and what this means to you. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, most of my drawings come out of my story, which is I grew up in Chicago. I feel a strong connection to the city and my environment and everything, so which is buildings and the built environment. And the other thing is, as far as nature goes, I never really was interested in drawing it or painting it.
Mm-hmm.
I was more about experiencing it.
Okay.
And I read something that Edward Hopper said once, and he was kind of the same mind. He did not like drawing nature. In fact, when he was out in New Mexico, everybody else is painting the light, and they're going out into the desert, whatever. And he went to the railroad yards, and he painted the steam engines and stuff, and that's something I would have done.
Yeah.
But as far as the built environment is, I mean, it's what I came from, and it's I used to paint buildings, and then I got into drawing alleys, and that's where I'm at now.
Yeah.
So,
One of the things that makes complete sense to me, one of the things that I love about man-made structures, I particularly like ones that are aged and were once something really amazing, and now they're kind of like falling apart.
yeah.
And you bring up the idea of ghosts, and I'm always thinking that a dilapidated building or structure, at one point it was brand new. Like,
Right, yes.
and there were people celebrating or having a party that it was opening, or that it was whatever the building was made for, that it was glorious. And I feel like you can see that sometimes,
Absolutely,
and I think
yes.
that's something that I try to capture in my paintings. And I think that's what's so powerful about paint. I don't think that's something you can do with like photography. You can capture something like that where you have the old building, and then you can also capture the ghosts, as you say.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I've always tried to put like, historical references, things that don't exist anymore, in my older paintings. L trains, I was big on the L, and I'd always paint cars that they stopped using, and so I've kind of gotten into with my alley drawings. I do more. These are contemporary drawings. I want to do it in a contemporary sense because the city's really changing, and it's very rapidly in the last 20 years. And a lot of the alley, the whole environment, the buildings are changing. Everything's being destroyed almost, and I want to capture stuff as is now before it's gone.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's just kind of where I'm at.
Do your paintings have contemporary elements in them, or are the elements that are in the painting are they timeless? Like obviously the structure, the street, like that's all timeless stuff. But then there could be other things, other elements that are in the painting that could be only would be relevant today.
Yeah, my older paintings, there's some anachronisms in there, like the older trains, and if you don't really follow elevated history, subway history, you're gonna miss that. I got old cars. I mean, it's, but since I've gotten away from it, it's mostly all contemporary stuff now, and whatever is in there is older buildings that were once a little bit nicer, maybe. They're seeing some age.
Now, where in Chicago did you grow up?
Far north side, West Rogers Park, Edgewater. I was started. We lived in apartments when I was little.
Okay.
And my family finally bought a bungalow in West Rogers Park. So,
Where in West Rogers Park?
by Dolan in California.
Well, what grammar school did you go to?
Boone.
How old are you?
How old am I? 50 something.
Okay,
57.
so you're younger than
50,
me because I went to Boone School too. I
right.
live near Devon in California, and so we're a little bit apart in age. That we weren't there at the same time, or were we? I'm 65, so probably not, but close to it.
My
Yeah,
parents bought the house in 72, so
yeah.
that's
Interesting.
So
Yeah,
even more
yeah.
things that at least
More
you guys
things,
have
yeah,
in common.
Yes.
Now, where
Definitely.
so you obviously grew up in West Rogers Park as well. Now, you
Yeah.
mentioned the architecture. I do feel like the architecture because I'm from Boston. I've only lived here for 2 years.
Mhm.
The architecture here in the city is it certainly seems to be unique. And now I'm not just talking about the Loop. Like I'm talking about these neighborhoods, like where we live. The buildings are, everyone has sunrooms.
Right.
Yeah,
When
I love
when I came
sunrooms,
here
yes.
when I came here with my realtor, he showed me like the first ones that he showed me. One of them had a sunroom, and my brain like lit up because we don't have sunrooms, and I'm all excited. And he's like, Rick, like everybody has sunrooms. I'm like, okay, but there's a lot of architecture, things about the architecture that is very different from where I'm from.
Yes.
And I love how you are capturing that. And certainly you're capturing it, Karen, in your paintings. One of the things in particular that I noticed is, I don't know what you call it, but like the tops of the buildings, when you have main streets and they're buildings that are like, it's like a whole block and it's businesses on one floor and then it's like one floor up. And then the tops of the buildings kind of have these architectural elements that are kind of interesting.
Right. Yes. And particularly, I've painted a lot on this block here in this area.
Yeah.
At some point, and it is interesting how the tops are like, in most cases or in many cases, there's nothing behind them, and the roofs are flat, and then they build up the front. There's a name for that. I don't know what it's called.
It's a facade, but
yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
A parapet.
Yeah, I can't remember, but like it's purely for decoration or for the beauty of it, just to make it more interesting. And I don't know if that's a Chicago thing so much, but it does give the street a certain look.
Yeah, there's a building because I drive to Greenleaf Studios every morning.
Sure, yeah.
And there is a building, I think it's north of Devon on Ridge, and it's a huge like city block, and the businesses are like nothing. It's like probably like a liquor store and a cell phone store. But the building is beautiful. It's this huge building. And I'm thinking, again, when this was built, like they hired architects to design this, and they went to a lot of detail to make this thing. And I don't know what it was originally. I mean, who knows? But there's a lot of stuff like that around here. It's incredible.
A lot of history.
It's really neat. A lot of the buildings around here and north like that were built in the 1920s, and they had these amphoras, these concrete amphoras up on top where Karen was talking about. There was the building behind me a couple of years ago. One of those things fell onto the sidewalk.
Oh God! Yeah.
I think it might have got hit by lightning or something, but it could have killed somebody. But it's really neat stuff. There's a store like by the Loyola L station that looks really cool. It's got in the tile work, the terracotta. There's a downtown Chicago. All the buildings from downtown Chicago is kind of in the glazing. It's really spectacular. People just walk right by it, and buildings around it are getting torn down, and it's. I hope it survives.
I almost can picture that. And if I've seen it, it's been a while. Is it on the west side of the street? Yeah. Well, I remember what commotion there was when the Granada movie theater was torn down, and how it's a beautiful old movie theater right there, basically on the east side of the street, but right by the Loyola University. And it was at one of those, majestic old movie theaters, and they didn't. What there is now is, I think there's like an architectural reference to it, a big arch, but nothing of the old building. But the people fought so hard to keep it, but they just couldn't keep it. And some people who are collectors of such things have little pieces of it.
Oh, really?
Pieces of the facade or of the stone or of the different elements of it. But yeah.
What about the Uptown Theater? Do we know what's going on with that?
I don't know, but I thought,
supposedly, they're going to start working on it this summer, and in a couple of years it's going to reopen. The city's behind it. They've finally got their TIF money and whatever. I think Jam Productions still owns it, or the guy who owns Jam owns it, or something like that. But it's supposedly coming back, and hopefully it does. And the Granada Theater that Karen was talking about was a lot like the Uptown.
Okay.
So
right, that era.
It was this beautiful palace.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So people listening to this podcast who aren't familiar with the Uptown Theater, the Uptown Theater is a gigantic theater. It was made for vaudeville. It was not made for movies, correct? It was built in
both, actually. Both,
okay.
They kind of at the same time.
Okay. It's gigantic. Yeah. Like the lobby itself is 6 stories tall, open. Yeah. I'll post photos of what this theater looks like. I think it seats like 4,500 people. Yeah. It would be the largest theater in the country if they open it, I believe. It's extremely, extremely elaborate. It has been closed, and it's been experiencing a lot of damage from elements and things of that nature. And
Weather.
apparently they've been trying to get the money to redo it. I think it's like $50 million or something insane is how much it's going to cost. But I guess they're planning on doing it. So it's going to be incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was somebody out in the northwestern suburbs took a lot of the fixtures, the lights, the chandeliers and everything, and he's been hanging on to it. I read a story about it, and he's going to put it back into the theater once they get going on this.
Wow. Huh.
So he's just been keeping it. He's a big fan of this stuff, and he's just been hanging on to it. So
Well, it sounds like it could be source material
Yeah.
for you
Yeah.
to do the facade, and you could do the alley
Alley
Yeah,
behind
the alley.
it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that alley is very
Yeah.
interesting. I've been to that. I walked down that street.
yeah, I haven't been there in a while. It's really I love that area. I like a few blocks from there is the S&A Studios, which is kind of like one of the earliest Hollywood studios. This is actually
silent
where-
films. That's
Yeah.
where Charlie Chaplin was.
Yeah,
Wow.
and he hated it here, from what I read. He hated the weather.
The
He
weather,
just-
I was gonna say.
he
Yeah,
just didn't like it here.
Yeah.
So that only lasted a few years because back then there were a lot of studio lots on Broadway, and even indoor scenes had to be shot outdoors because they didn't have proper lighting,
Mhm.
and they could only do it like 5-6 months out of the year. The rest of the time they it was winter, so it was hard to film movies here, and that was one of the reasons why they moved to Hollywood.
So was that whole silent movie boom in Chicago? Was that before Hollywood took off?
Pretty much, yeah. It was like 1914, I guess. I don't know, somewhere in
Oh, it
there.
was that long
It
ago.
was, yeah, 15. Yeah, and it was a very short period from what I understand. But the S&A studio and it's ESS.
A&A. I walk by it all the time.
Yeah, and it's it's from S and A, the first initials of the two owners, and they opened up a studio in Hollywood and moved everything out there. There was another major studio out there as well, but yeah, it was like that was right before Hollywood. So
I think it's fascinating to think about when silent movies were the thing, because people didn't know any more than that. Like right now we have Netflix, you can see everything on your phone. Like that's normal to
Right.
us.
Yeah.
When silent movies were the thing, like that was the thing. Like there was no idea of anything in the future of color or of movies with talk, and people were completely satisfied and entertained by going to a silent movie.
yeah, well, it was amazing technology. It
Oh,
was like,
absolutely.
it's like-
Yes. Yes.
to actually see somebody moving on a screen and
Yeah,
actually put a
yeah.
story together. Yeah, it was
Mesmerizing
Yeah.
just to watch. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, movie and being able to see the world, that was the only way people living in rural America would actually get to see the world,
Yeah.
because the only other thing you would have would be print, like a
Mhm.
black and white newspaper. So it's a very powerful medium. The people that were putting together movies, like they had like a lot of influence, I think, on how people viewed the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely,
Because there was no
definitely, yes,
television,
yes.
there was no nothing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
going to the movie was an experience too. We're talking about these movie palaces, and there's a reason why they called them palaces. I mean, it was regular people could go to this amazing castle
Sure, yeah.
almost, and just take that in as well. And with the live music along with the movies, there was, and as you said, there was vaudeville, so there was stage stuff going on there too. But it was just
Yeah.
an amazing place to escape like normal drudgery work. This is the 1920s, so we're just
Yeah.
getting established in the 9 to 5 grind and or whatever, and it's like
Yeah.
you need to escape from that.
Yeah. We had the Northtown Theater on
Western, yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
That
That was beautiful. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Rogers Park is great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it. That's
Yeah.
where my studio is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you guys ever go to well, no, it's before your time. I was going to say Riverview Park.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know. I did.
I was there.
I was at Riverview. Yes, for sure. Yes.
really?
Yes. Just, barely make, because I'm 65. So, and I think, maybe I only went once. My older brother went a lot more and has more memories of it. But yeah, that was the ultimate. And, talk about driving by, and now it's like a strip mall, right? And, just you can feel it. Those of us who know that it was
Yeah.
there, you feel it. You know.
You went as well?
Yeah, my
Yeah.
dad took me twice when I think I was in kindergarten, and it's like a couple of my earliest memories. And I remember looking up at the roller coaster and wanting
Oh,
to
yeah.
go on it, and my
Yeah.
dad telling me I was too little.
Oh,
and
my God.
someday we'll get to do that, and that never happened. But
I recently went back there. I love amusement parks, and I love old amusement parks and abandoned amusement parks and things of that nature. So I recently went to Riverview because I heard that there were remnants, and there are, in fact,
Are there really
things
Ooh.
from the park. They
Wow.
used to have this ride called, well, I didn't know what it was, but we found all these foundations, and I went on this thing called historical aerials. Have you heard about this?
no.
Oh,
No.
It's incredible.
is it air? You fly and look
So
down,
it's
or?
like Google satellite view,
Okay. Uh-huh.
but it's from the past.
Oh,
So someone was
wow.
taking photographs of the entire United States, some of them back to the 30s.
Mhm.
And it's just like Google Maps. You type in a location,
Yeah.
and then you get a current map of today, and then there's a slider, and you pick the date. And then you slide and you see this photograph of years ago. So I went to Riverview and I figured out where these cement things were. And then then I found the picture, I think it was from the 60s, and it was the foundations of the giant pool for the shoot ride.
Oh yeah, I
Wow.
It's
remember
still there.
that ride. Yeah.
Wow.
It's
Oh
all
wow.
still
Oh
there.
yeah, I loved. You know what? It's just making me feel like so much. The word nostalgic, comes to mind. I've gone back now, and I've been watching old Twilight Zones. I love Twilight Zones, so
Twilight
now I'm just
Zone.
watching them from the beginning, just one after the other, and that's what it is. This powerful sense of this, talking about the old amusement parks, this eerie kind of nostalgic feeling that it's very compelling. Somehow it's a little bit scary and very compelling to me. I don't know if maybe not scary to you.
Well, that
but-
was one of the cool things about amusement parks.
Yeah.
There was a certain amount of scariness to
Yes,
them. There's like
uh-huh,
there was
yeah.
a freak show. There were freak shows. There was like
Yeah.
the rides were kind of dilapidated.
And the roller coaster, you didn't know if it was shaky. You didn't know if it was
Yeah.
going to go off the track.
Like I remember going to Coney Island about a decade ago and riding on the Cyclone. And I'm thinking, wow, this thing's 70 years old, and the thing's rattling, and you go around a corner, and you can hear the wheels leave the track.
Totally.
Wow.
And the bar that holds you in the seat, that's got a lot of play in it, and
Right.
you drop, and the thing, you go up, and then there was one part where there's a bracing that's almost just above your head, and as you drop under it, the car drops first, and you're like, oh man, I'm going right into this thing.
Called a head chopper.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly. It's like it brings up you could actually die on this stupid thing.
Yeah.
Every now and then
Cool.
people do. I mean,
Yeah.
They do. But yeah, we have we had an amusement park called Lincoln Park,
Mhm.
which was outside of Boston, and it shut down in the 80s, but it was left abandoned for years and years. Like up until a few years ago, the roller coaster was still there.
Wow.
And it was
huh.
really
Yeah.
cool. My friends and I went
Yeah.
back there one time, and we were climbing up the tracks, and the reason why we went is they had this big sign that said coaster over the entrance, and we were going to take the coaster sign, and we brought a truck, and we were going to unscrew it and put it on I had a big wall in my condominium in Boston. Well, we got there, and I think we must have seen a picture of the sign on the internet. It was gigantic. Like,
Wow.
it was,
Yeah.
there was
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
no way we could have transported this
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So we ended up just like playing on the roller coaster, but it was very cool. And I had been there as a kid, and it just was a lot of these ghosts, a lot of memories.
Yeah.
And it was that same type of thing that I talked about in my paintings, where you can see the past and you can see something, the glory and
Yeah.
the new and the freshness
Yeah.
and all of the positive energy that was once someplace was still coming through
Mhm.
when I was there. And I think that is a really, that's an interesting experience that you can, we can all experience
Yeah.
with older things.
It's a type of time travel. When you look at something now in Europe a lot, that especially in Italy, I remember you would be looking at it in a church, and then part of the wall is carved away, and they say, well, this is 500 years ago, and then another layer, and they preserve the sections so you can actually see how it evolved and changed. And I don't think we do that here. I mean, but you and I know
Yeah.
maybe because we're used to staring at things and I'm sure you've had the experience where you are, you painted something and it's no longer
Yeah,
there,
and I can,
yeah.
There's plenty of places that I visit that just around here that
Yeah.
since I've lived here all my life, I'm like, that was here. This thing was over there. This used to be Sir Whoopi's. It's like,
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah.
I start to turn into that old man that just
Exactly.
in my day.
And back in my day.
Do you feel like that's something, getting back to your artwork, do you feel like that's something that you're trying to capture in your art?
In a way, yeah, because some of them are actually places that I've seen a lot of, and I got all of my childhood apartment buildings at least in one drawing, and my parents'
really?
house,
Huh.
yeah. So there's kind of a series there, but this is me. This is the city's me, and that's what I'm trying to draw.
Do you think that you are expressing you in when we're looking at these alleys?
Yeah,
Is it you?
it's me telling my story and telling my connection to the environment and how important it is, and what I hope from people looking at it. I hope they get a sense of that, and perhaps maybe feel better about where they come from. Think about the things that they're connected with, their surroundings. And hopefully, ultimately, that makes us all kind of better and more inspired, I guess. Unless, one lives in a complete, I don't know, I don't know what.
No, I know.
War
I
zone,
definitely,
guess.
I definitely relate to that. When I used to paint in the street a lot, I remember one time this little kid came up to me and, he looked at me and said, "Well, why are you copying that building?" Which I thought was great for a little kid to say I was copying the building, because that's essentially what I was doing. And just the fact that he looked at me and he looked at the building, and he looked at my canvas, and you're copying that building. So, I mean, I don't remember what I told him, but it just made me think about, because I'm just kind of having a strong response to it, and it's becoming part of my vision, and I find that when I paint someplace like this street it's so wild. I haven't been here in a while now. I don't know why.
And
I just haven't had.
And we're on Clark Street. We're
Right.
recording
Oh,
this.
yeah,
We're recording this on Clark, like just north of Foster
Right.
on Clark
Yes.
Street.
Yes. And I know all these buildings so well from having stared at them for so much and painted. That familiarity, there's a comfort to that.
Yeah.
That's part of my connection to the city here.
And I think you raise a good point there. It's also, when I'm doing these drawings, I'm kind of revisiting these. It's just I'm actually
Right,
going back
yeah.
to the old neighborhood, even though I'm still in the old neighborhood. But it's I'm visiting these and looking at them with maybe a little more closely, these certain alleys. And I do alleys around the city too. It's not just this neighborhood. So I'm exploring as well, and I want to do more on the south side. I don't get down there enough. This city is amazing because the south side and the north side are like two different cities,
Right.
and
yeah.
they're within the same city. So you can actually visit another city while you're here. I mean,
But they're really far apart. People, I mean, Chicago is huge.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you have to make it's and that's why it almost feels like another city to go to the south side, because it takes some effort. You gotta it's a little bit of a distance that you have to cover. So I want to do more of that. Maybe even down on the southeast side, where I've driven around there and down by Calumet, and it feels like I've never been to Pennsylvania, but it feels like pictures that I've seen of some of the steel towns in Pennsylvania. So that's another aspect to this drawing, is it gives me a reason and a desire to actually explore different parts of the city that are different from what I know, and it's kind of inspiring that way.
Cool. Can you tell me, Karen, about the ghosty images that I sometimes see in some of your paintings and why that's in there? I think I know.
Right. Well, then you might be able to tell me. No, I mean, in some cases, I think, I could say, and one way for me of looking at it is that I'm kind of blending, when I was working from dreams and imagination, with the architectural stuff, but I'm not thinking of it consciously that way. I also have a lot of dogs in my paintings. And I love dogs. My dog's in my car right now. She's waiting for me. But it's all good. She's fine. She's used to it. But anyway, and I think...
And it's just so you know, it's February, so her dog is not in a hot car.
No, it's fine. And it's like in the 40s, so it's good. But I think that I'm also thinking a lot about, maybe it sounds a little bit trite, but what the heck, I'll say it, mortality, and thinking about these old buildings and these old structures. They will be here, and they will be new owners and new, people living there. And then at some point I won't be here. So sometimes I imagine that I have my, I hope. I'm not a religious person. I don't have unfortunately, I wish I did. I don't have any, I can't hold on to anything about where I think I'm going after I die, but I sometimes wish I could just have, float around in the universe in my familiar spaces with my animals next to me. And I think then, so there's that aspect of it. And then compositionally, sometimes I think, oh, this painting isn't quite finished. Needs a dog. And then I think, well, what is a dog doing here? I don't think about it too much consciously, but it evolves like, why is the dog here? Or is this a living dog? Is it a ghost? And I like thinking about the ghosts, and I like it. And I'm, I just kind of like try to evolve the image so it works and completes the composition.
Yeah.
And then I let it kind of evolve into something else. And it's kind of new for me to really let go into that. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. The two of you are in a 2-person show called Chicago Streets and Ways at the Hofheimer Gallery. And I think that the conversation that we had today is going to be very informative to people looking at your artwork that's going to be at the show. Like, I think it's really relevant. So I'm very excited that we had this conversation. So just to give people listening a little bit more, the Hofheimer Gallery, it's in Ravenswood. It's on Damon Ave, right north of Lawrence. And the opening reception is March 6th from 5 to 6, and the show runs until the 28th. And this is the year 2020. We don't know how long this is going to be. This podcast will be. What did I say it wrong?
5 to 8. That's all.
Oh, 5 to 8. Okay, correction. But I don't know. Is there anything you guys want to say about the show and the work?
Come on down and
come on down. I am really looking forward to it. I don't know your work very well, Bill, but I know it. Yeah. But I don't. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens when.
And I am too, and I like the dialogue that the work is going to have with each other. I think this was very well. I really love your work, and I'm not as familiar with your newer stuff, but there's some stuff back from the '90s that I really liked. Your stuff. It was very. There's a desolation that I loved. There's one particular piece that was the L tracks crossing by Wilson that have since been torn down and rebuilt, but it looked like the way the sun was and everything. It looked like a winter afternoon or something. There's nobody around, nobody on the street, and I really like that about some of your work. With
me too. There's a lot of desolation
and
there's a sense of seriousness about yours, whereas yours is a little bit more playful. So I think the two of them together is going to be amazing.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm too. And I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation with anybody that's listening that wants to talk about it or have questions too.
Absolutely.
Come to the opening and we can continue this conversation.
Yeah.
This will be great. Well, thank you guys so much.
You.
Why don't you share with listeners where people can learn like your website or Instagram or whatever?
Dolanart.com, DOLANART. And I'm on Instagram at William Dolan, and also I'm on Facebook a lot. William Dolan, I think, is my.
And I'm KarenPerl.com, and that's Perl, as in the oyster pearl, but no A. And I
So
think
Perl.
Karen, PERL.com. Yeah. I think my Instagram is Perl Karen for some reason, but it's...
Okay. Well, we'll be able to. Well, I will put on the website. I create a page for this, so
sounds
the
good.
actual stuff will all be on there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was wonderful. Thank you guys so much for talking to me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's wonderful.
My name is Ricky McGuckran, and you have been listening to Eager to Know, the podcast. If you haven't already, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join me next week for another Eager to Know podcast.